It stands to reason that the more time you spend off the bike, the more fitness that you're going to lose. And my general rule of thumb is that if you spend 2 weeks off the bike, you've basically lost half of your fitness. But what happens when you spend an extended period of time off the bike? Well, today I'm going to tell you about the time that I did just that and exactly what I needed to do to get my fitness back afterwards. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of backstory to give you an idea of how I got into that situation in the first place. It's September 2014 and I'm working out in the US in a small town in Massachusetts called Cohasset. I'm a cameraman on a British camera crew that's producing a series of short dramas. Now, because I knew I was going to be there for 2 months, literally day one, I went down to the local Walmart and I bought myself a relatively cheap mountain bike. And then on literally my first ride, I managed to fall off. Basically, I went over some railway lines that were at a funny angle and I managed to kind of injure my left leg with some fairly severe road rash. A few months earlier in the UK, I'd fallen off my bike and sustained similar injuries to my upper arm, and I was very surprised at how quickly all of that healed. It took less than a week before there were no signs at all that I'd fallen. So I thought to myself, well, a week or so, I'll be fine. Plus, also coming from the UK, where healthcare is free, I didn't want the expense of going to a doctor or a hospital in the US, even though I had travel medical insurance, and what a mistake that turned out to be. So I went down to the local CVS, I bought myself a load of antiseptics and bandages, patched myself up and went on my merry way. 10 days later, my wounds had not healed. In fact, they were considerably worse and I was in excruciating pain. Luckily for me, the production that I was working on had caused quite a bit of a stir in this small American town. And in fact, we'd made the Boston Globe because we'd made such an impact. And luckily for me, this meant that the director employed a kind of open house policy where the neighbours could come in and watch what we were doing. And about 2 weeks after my accident, we had a lady in there who was actually a nurse. And when she saw that I was all bandaged up, she asked me what had happened. And I said, oh, I'd fallen off my bike and I patched myself up and I thought everything was going to be fine. And she said, well, no, let me have a look at that. So she had a look at it and she said to me, no, this is actually pretty serious. You need to get yourself some proper medical attention right now. So one of my colleagues took me off to a walk-in medical centre in a place called Weymouth, Massachusetts. And I saw a doctor there and she said that I had cellulitis and it was actually pretty bad. So she immediately gave me a tetanus injection and put me on an antibiotic drip, and she prescribed a series of antibiotic tablets. She also said that if I'd left it any longer, I was in danger of either losing my leg or worse still, of actually dying from basically the infection of the cellulitis. Once I started the course of antibiotics, I started to feel better. All of those flu-y infection feelings started to subside. The wounds started to heal, although very, very slowly, and I was still in quite a lot of pain. Unfortunately for me, I still had to work. I'd been flown out from the UK specifically to do that job, and that was precisely what I was there to do. By the end of the shoot, my wounds had healed a little more and the pain had subsided a bit, and I managed to get myself on the plane and fly back home to the UK. But it wasn't for another couple of weeks that I felt ready to get on the bike and start cycling. By that time, I'd been off the bike for 6 weeks and I was well and truly back to square one. In fact, it felt like I'd never ridden a bike in my entire life. Unfortunately, by that time it was November, the weather had closed in, it was cold, it was wet and it was windy, and I just did not fancy building up my fitness at all. So I waited for a few months and then I signed up for an event called Paris Hailing in an attempt to give myself a bit of a goal and a reason to start getting on the bike and getting some training in. Now this event was over 5 days and it involved cycling from Hailing Island, which is only just down the road here in Hampshire, all the way to Paris and then all the way back to Hailing Island again in 5 days, and it's a distance of about 600 kilometers, and that was my goal that I was training for. So that started in January and I was out cycling as much as I could, but it really was hard going. It was starting off with very easy little distances up to the local village and back, which was only about 14 kilometers, and then I slowly extended it doing my Buns, Bent and Hoe route, which is 30 kilometers and has a little bit of climbing in it, and then it was just taking it very slowly, extending it just almost weekly by about 10% each time, and just building up my fitness and focusing on the goal of the Paris Hailing bike ride. The Paris Hailing ride was taking place in July, so I knew I had plenty of time to train for it. Plus all my friends from my cycling club were taking part as well. It was like I think it was the 10th anniversary of the club being formed, so it was a bit of a celebration there, and that was an extra incentive for me. And in the end, yes, it took me 6 months to train for it, but I did the 5 days absolutely no problem, rode into Paris, rode back to Hailing Island, had an absolutely fantastic time, and in fact I would say that I was actually pretty strong during the whole of the 5 days. When you spend a long period of time off the bike, particularly after an accident, it can be really hard to get back on the bike again. Now for me personally, I didn't have any issues or fears about getting on the bike. I knew that my accident was just a stupid one-off, but if you're suffering from just a fear or a lack of confidence about getting on the bike again, the only way that you're going to be able to get over that is just by getting on the bike and riding. Now there's nowhere to say that you have to do that in a busy environment or a dangerous environment. You can do that in a nice quiet park somewhere on grass so that you have a soft landing spot should you fall off the bike. But it's very important that you manage to get on the bike from your mental point of view. Physically, it's also important as well, because the sooner you start building up your fitness, the sooner you will actually get back to fitness. If you have been on the bike because of injury or because of illness, it's also very important not to get back on the bike too soon. If you're not fully recovered, then you could actually be doing yourself a lot more harm than good, and you could be delaying your recovery by just giving yourself that setback. So again, just make absolutely certain that you're fully recovered before you do get on the bike. The two things that this whole incident has taught me is, firstly, if you fall off your bike and injure yourself, always seek medical attention, no matter how minor or insignificant those injuries are, because unfortunately they can get very complicated very quickly. And secondly, no matter how long you've spent off the bike, you can always come back and get your fitness. Now, like me, I spent 6 weeks off the bike. It's the longest period I've ever done that. I felt that I was absolutely at square one. In fact, I felt I was beyond square one. Like I say, I felt like I'd never ridden a bike in my entire life. But with the right motivation and the right goals, you can come back. It will take a lot of work and it might not be easy, but you can do it. Thanks for watching.